All right, I'm going to tell you something that might sound weird coming from someone who teaches about AI tools. If you're thinking about installing OpenClaw, I would say maybe wait a second. Wait until you do something that takes about 30 minutes, but that 90% of people skip entirely. And look, I totally get the excitement. OpenClaw is everywhere right now. 250,000 stars on GitHub and counting. Creators are building entire content series around it. And people are doing some really, really impressive things that they're able to activate with a simple text message. It is truly one of the most exciting tools I've seen in years, but here's what I'm also seeing. For every person who built a super impressive workflow, there are probably 20 other people who probably installed it on a Friday, played with it over the weekend, and haven't touched it since. And a few that actually have racked up serious API bills without even realizing it. Here's the deal. The problem is that most people skip the one step that determines whether this thing actually changes how they work or if it just sits there collecting dust. Today, I'm going to walk you through exactly that step and everything else you need to think about before you install OpenClaw. Let's get started. All right, so here is our game plan. We are going to cover a couple of things. So first, what OpenClaw actually is, how it works under the hood, because the architecture is really important to understand and will change how you think about setting up. Second, we're going to talk about the real security landscape and why most people actually quit this tool within a month. Third, we're going to talk about the context layer, which is the thing that actually determines whether your agent is actually useful or just expensive noise. And finally, we are going to cover everything you need to do before you start that installation. By the end of this video, you're going to have a framework that tells you whether you even should install OpenClaw, and if you should, exactly how to prepare for it. Let's get into it. Now, if you don't know me, I'm Sunny. I'm a serial founder now on my fourth startup. I'm a former senior engineer at Bloomberg and Shopify, and currently an adjunct professor at Columbia Business School, where I teach tech and AI. I've been building software for over 15 years, well before AI, and I've made all the mistakes so you don't have to. And I'm actually here to help in this video and in all my videos to help you make sense of the tech landscape and to better understand the tools that we have. Let's get started. Okay, first things first. Let me explain what OpenClaw actually is, because I think once you understand this, it almost completely changes how you approach setting it up. OpenClaw is not a chatbot. It is not like ChatGPT where you enter something and you get something back. That is absolutely not what this is. OpenClaw is a self-hosted AI agent that runs on your own hardware. And the key word here is agent. It can actually do things. It can read your files. It can execute terminal commands. It can browse the web. It can send emails, and it can control your calendar. And it's persistent, meaning it remembers things from weeks ago. You can access it through messaging apps that you already use, like WhatsApp, Telegram, Discord, Slack, whatever you prefer. All right, so now here is how it's built under the hood. And this matters, so stay with me. So you've got three layers. First, you've got your channels layer. These are essentially the messaging app that you connected it to. Could be WhatsApp, Slack, Telegram, whatever you decided would be your messaging platform. Then you have the gateway layer. Think of this as the control center. It sits in the middle. It receives everything coming in from your channels and decides where to route it. And third, you have the agent runtime. And that's what I would call the brain. This is where the AI is actually thinking, making decisions, calling tools, figuring out what to do next. So the flow is simple. You send a message through one of your apps, it hits the gateway, which is the control center, then the gateway routes it to the brain, which is that AI agent runtime. And then the brain actually decides what to do, which could be reading a file, sending an email, whatever command makes sense. And then the response flows back out through the gateway to whatever channel you messaged from. That's it. That is the whole loop. Now, here's the thing that makes OpenClaw different from basically everything else out there. It's self-hosted and it's open source. You bring your own LLM and your data doesn't actually leave your infrastructure except for when it hits the model API. And this is a thing that makes it powerful, but also the thing that makes it risky if you're not intentional about it. Think of it like this. Compare it to something like Cowork, which is Anthropic's agent. Cowork runs in a sandbox. Everything it does is isolated. You explicitly grant folder access. It's really designed to be safe by default. OpenClaw, on the other hand, is designed to be powerful by default. Maximum access, maximum capability, and that power requires discipline. All right, so let's actually talk about the actual security perspective, because there is definitely a gap between what people think is happening and what is actually happening. So when OpenClaw exploded in popularity in late 2025, security researchers started scanning the internet for exposed OpenClaw instances. And what they found was hundreds of OpenClaw instances just exposed to the web. No authentication, full file system access, full API call capability, conversation histories, everything just sitting out there. And there was a case of one person who actually installed OpenClaw and left all the default settings on. And by default, OpenClaw's front door, the gateway, was wide open to the internet. Not just their computer, the entire internet. And they didn't even realize it. It's kind of like leaving your house with the front door open and a large sign that says, "Come on in." 48 hours later, someone found that open door, got in, and started using their AI provider and racked up a $2,400 bill in 2 days. And the worst part is they didn't even realize it until the bill came. Now, here's something most people miss about how OpenClaw handles permissions. It's actually 2 layers of security, not one. Think of it like a building with 2 locked doors. You've got permissions on the agent itself. That's the first door. But then there's also the sandbox layer, that second door. Both doors have to be open for something to actually happen. That's actually great design, but here's the catch. Most people I talk to only know of that first door. They set that up and they think they're done. They don't even know that there's that sandbox level of permissioning that exists. Now, here's my larger take on this. This security stuff tends to scare people away. They hear things like exposed instances and $2,400 bills and think, okay, this isn't for me. I'm not a DevOps engineer. But here's the thing. You don't need to be. What I just described, setting up permissions, locking down a gateway, that's not advanced security engineering. That is just onboarding. It's the same as when you go and set up a bank account and they make you set up a PIN number and make you set up multi-factor authentication. You don't need to understand how encryption works to do that. You just need to follow the steps. And the reason I'm telling you about the scary incidents is not to scare you off. It's so that you can take those 5 minutes to do the setup right, because the difference between a secure OpenClaw install and an exposed one is literally 5 minutes of intentional configuration. That's it. All right, let's keep going. Okay, let's talk about the real reason so many people stop using OpenClaw after they install it. It's because they didn't really prepare for it to work. Think about it like this. So someone goes and sees an OpenClaw demo. It looks amazing. Some creator shows an agent summarizing documents and drafting emails, and that person goes, I need this. So on a Friday, they install it. They spend an hour with the onboarding wizard. They pick Claude as the model. They set it up. It works. They tinker with it for a couple of hours. It's all fun because it's all kind of new, right? But then Monday hits and that person needs to do actual work. And the issue at hand is that OpenClaw was never really integrated into their actual workflow. It's separate. So naturally, it gets abandoned. Now, the problem is not OpenClaw itself. The problem is that they did not have a clear answer to one specific question before they installed it. And here it is. What is one specific thing that happens repeatedly in your work that you hate doing and would legitimately love not to do? So when I say specific, I'm not saying something like manage my schedule, or I'm actually talking about specific. Like, for example, after every sales call, I hate spending hours pulling together notes or building a follow-up deck. Or every time someone sends me a research report, I have to read it and write up a summary. Or I spend 30 minutes filtering through email, separating what's actually urgent from everything else. So if you can't answer that specific question, I would strongly recommend, don't install OpenClaw. Because without that answer, you're installing a powerful tool with no clear workflow. And powerful tools with no clear workflow will sit unused every time. Now, if you can answer that question, then you've done the thing that so many people skip. You've identified your workflow, and that makes everything that comes after actually possible. All right, let's move on to the context layer. So let's say you've done all the work we just described. You have a clear idea on how you want to leverage OpenClaw. Let's say, as an example, you want an agent to draft responses to customer support emails before you review and send them. Good. That's a real solid example of a workflow. Now, here's where people mess up next. They install OpenClaw and, for example, they'll say draft responses to customer emails, and they think that's enough. But that is not sufficient, not even close. Because under the hood, what you're doing is you're giving an AI system a task and some context. And the quality of the output is almost entirely determined by the quality of the context you provide. So if you're not intentional about this part, about the context layer, you will get hallucinations. You'll get bad responses. And then you stop using it because it's not helpful. But it's not OpenClaw's fault. You just didn't give it what it needed. So think about what your agent actually needs to know what to do and to know how to do it well. It needs to know things like your voice, your tone, the level of formality that you use. It needs to know what your product actually does. It probably needs to know what information you're allowed to share and what you're not allowed to share, and when the customer service request should defer to a manager or when the decision should be made at your level. Without all of that, the AI is guessing. And when an AI guesses about something you care about, it usually doesn't yield the best results. So before you set this thing loose, think about that context layer. What files should it have access to? Should you provide your email templates? Maybe give it access to your product knowledge base, customer documentation, whatever makes sense for your context. Because ultimately, here's the thing. This context layer is also where you start thinking about guardrails. You're not just delegating a task, you're delegating it to something that has access to your systems. So you need to be intentional about what it can and cannot do. And honestly, this is actually a good time to mention something that I feel pretty strong about. You know, there's this narrative right now that the model is the most important thing. Everyone's chasing the newest, most powerful model. And sure, the model does matter. But here's what I've learned in building AI systems for the last couple of years. The quality of your agent is not only determined by how smart the model is, it's determined by how much time you invested in describing what you actually want. I've seen basic agents with mid-tier models work beautifully because someone spent an entire afternoon documenting the context, writing clear instructions, thinking through the edge cases. And I've seen people with access to the most powerful models on the planet get complete garbage output because they didn't provide any context. The model is not the bottleneck. Your ability to provide appropriate context is the bottleneck. And by the way, that's true for OpenClaw, it's true for Claude, and it's probably going to be true for every AI tool you'll ever use. All right, so now let's actually talk about the stuff you should actually do before you download anything. And this isn't actually technical. A lot of this is just being intentional. First, decide where this thing is going to live. Are you running it on your laptop, your desktop, a dedicated server, a Mac Mini sitting in your closet? Because this decision matters more than people think. If it's on your laptop, it will only run when your laptop is open. If you close the lid, your agent goes to sleep. That's fine if you just want something to interact with during work hours. But if you want it checking your inbox at 6 a.m. before you're awake, which is, by the way, one of the most popular use cases, that's not going to work on a laptop. You need something that's always on and always connected. A lot of people are opting for a Mac Mini or a super cheap cloud server for this. Just decide before you install so you're not migrating everything weeks later. Second, pick your model provider ahead of time. OpenClaw lets you bring your own LLM. So it could be Anthropic, OpenAI, it could be even a local model. Whatever you want, you've got options. My recommendation is start with Claude, specifically Claude Opus if you can afford it. You can also use Sonnet if you want to keep costs down. And it's great because it handles long context and it is the officially recommended model, and it's excellent at following complex instructions, which matters a lot when you're configuring an agent. But the real point here is have your API key ready before you start. Go to your provider's dashboard, set up billing, generate the key, have it copied and ready to paste, because the onboarding wizard is going to ask you for it, and you don't want to be scrambling for this mid-setup. And by the way, on that point, here's what I'd strongly recommend. When you set up your API connection with your model provider, turn off auto renewal. Instead, fund your account in increments that you can afford. This could be $20, $50, $500, whatever makes sense for you. Because here's the thing. You are handing your API key to an autonomous agent, an agent that can make decisions on its own, run tasks on its own, run loops on its own. And if something goes sideways, if the agent gets stuck in a loop, if tasks spiral, or maybe you misconfigure something, it's going to burn through those tokens. And if auto renewal is on, it will just keep charging over and over again. And you won't even know until you check your dashboard and your stomach drops. So treat it like a prepaid card, not a credit card. Fund it with what you can afford to lose. All right, moving on. The third thing that I want you to do is I want you to think about your contexts the context that you want in your system before you install it. So OpenClaw uses these plain text files to know who it is and know who you are. And the two files you should know about is the Soul.md and the user.md file. Let's talk about the Soul.md file first. That is your agent's personality file. It defines how the agent behaves, what tone it uses, what it will do, what it won't do. Think of it as the agent's character sheet. The second file is a user.md file. That one is all about you, your name, your time zone, your job, your key contacts, your preferences. It's everything the agent needs to know about the person it's working for. And here's the thing, both of these files get read at the start of every single session. OpenClaw starts fresh every time. It doesn't actually remember yesterday's conversation automatically. It needs to read its files. So if those files are empty, every conversation pretty much starts from zero. Your agent has no idea who it is, has no idea who you are. Both of those files are very thoughtful and specific and very important to kind of think about from the jump. So before you install anything, I want you to open up a doc and start writing these out. For your Soul.md, think about what tone should the agent use. Should it be casual? Should it be formal? Should it be concise? Should it be detailed? What should it never do? What are the guardrails? Think of it like writing an onboarding doc for a new hire. Here's how I like things done. Here's what's off limits, things like that. And then for the user.md file, it should answer who you are. What do you do? What are your active projects right now? What are the key people that you work with in your work life? What's your time zone? 5 minutes of thinking about those docs can really go a long way in making your OpenClaw experience feel more customized to you and a lot less generic. Okay, and moving on, now the last thing I want you to do is I want you to decide on the messaging channel that you want to communicate with OpenClaw through. It could be WhatsApp, it could be Telegram, Discord, Slack. You've got options, but you should definitely pick one. From what I've seen most people have the most positive experience with Slack because it's easy to set up, but of course, that is your preference. Great, so we've covered a couple of things. We've covered what you should do before you actually download. But before we close out, I do want to spend a moment to ask whether OpenClaw is even the right tool for you, because I think that it's important to really think about whether this really makes sense or not. Ultimately, I'm not trying to sell you an OpenClaw. I work with tons of different tools, but I've learned that this is a really powerful solution if the use cases make sense. There are legit reasons to use OpenClaw. Maybe you need something autonomous. Maybe you need it to make decisions for you. Maybe you need it to just have broad access. Or maybe you need to coordinate across multiple systems. That's when OpenClaw really makes sense. But there are a lot of tasks that don't actually need that. Maybe you just need something to summarize meeting notes. Maybe you need an agent with access to your file system or email, or you just need a really good prompt that you can paste into Claude to do the job. If you want to organize your calendar, do you need OpenClaw, or do you just want a targeted automation tool that's specifically designed for calendar management? If you want to maintain documentation or organize research, maybe Cowork is actually a better fit. It's purpose-built for that stuff. You're not going to buy a Ferrari to go to a grocery store, right? But here's the pattern I have noticed. The best decision makers I know do not pick the most powerful tool from the jump. They pick the least powerful tool that actually solves their problem. Because the less powerful tool, that means the less surface area for things to go wrong. It's easier to set up, easier to maintain, and easier to explain to other people. So before you decide on OpenClaw, I want you to ask yourself, what is the minimum capable tool that actually solves your problem? Is it actually OpenClaw, or is it something else? Because if it is something else, it may make sense to start there. All right, we are near the end of the video. Let's land this plane. But first, I don't want you to think that I am anti-OpenClaw. I am certainly not. It's a seriously powerful tool. I use it and I love it. But power without strategy is just essentially expensive chaos. Here is what I want you to take away from this video. The barrier to using powerful AI tools has never been lower. Anyone can install OpenClaw in 10 minutes, but the barrier to using them well, that hasn't changed. That still requires you to slow down, think about what you actually need, and be deliberate about how you set things up. Again, power without intention is just chaos. Be intentional. All right, if you stuck around till the end of this video, I appreciate you. I will see you on the next one.